How do you manage snowflakes in the workplace? Well, very carefully with kid gloves, and it's still not going to do you any good. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. And, gentlemen, I have to tell you this just outrageous story. It was put up as a tweet storm by a young business and branding consultant named Carol Blymeyer. And this story caught my eye, and it turned into just the most popular column I've written in I don't know how long for PJ Media. So I'm just going to give you kind of the condensed version to get things going here. Uh, uh, Carol Blymeyer said on Twitter that this young woman, a writer, probably in her late 20s, and her boss, another woman, a little bit older, had been having a discussion in hushed tones, but their volume got louder toward the end of the conversation because the young woman was getting agitated about a particular edit that her boss was trying to make on this piece she'd written. And the young woman kept saying, "I don't know why you corrected that because I spell it with a P in it." The boss said, very calmly, "But that's not how the word is spelled. There is no P in hamster." Of all the things to get in a fight with your boss about, right? The young woman said, "But you don't know that. I learned to spell it with a P in it, so that's how I spell it." Uh, the boss, apparently remaining very calm and professional this whole time, I think I would have lost it at this point, said, "Let's go to dictionary.com and look it up." And this, Bill, is, I think, where it gets kind of interesting. Believe it or not, on a philosophical level, the young woman, according to Blymeyer, insists that she doesn't need to look it up because it's fine to spell it with a P because that's how she wanted to spell it. Is this just one small bitter piece of fruit from teaching kids that there's no objective reality?
Yes, and I think the fastest way to educate this individual person is when she's expecting her $800 paycheck. I think you should make it out for $23.46 and explain to her that that's how I add to 800. I've always added to 800 this way. And who are you to tell me that this is not 800? This is how I write 800. Here's your paycheck. Knock yourself out. And sit there and wait for the inevitable temper tantrum. This is not just a case of this is not just representative of the ignorance that has been purposely instilled in this generation. It's one thing to not know how to spell hamster.
Sure.
And that's not a particularly egregious spelling mistake as far as some of them go. You know, I mean, it seems reasonable enough. Yeah. But that's not the point, and that's why you're bringing up the story. The point is that there must be, is that your feelings have to trump everything else. If your feelings are not important than anything else, then all of progressivism goes away. If the feelings of one transgendered athlete don't outweigh the feelings and the effort and the years of work of millions and millions of biological girls, well, then you don't have progressivism. So the feelings have to win, and the more hurt you are and the more of a victim you are, the higher you are on the truth scale, not on the victimhood scale, on the truth scale. The more victimhood you have, the truer the things you are saying become. And this is why this generation was stolen. This is why they had their entire lives stolen from them. Because in order to make people believe some of this nonsense, you've got to convince them that there's no such thing as a reality and that this is what you want, and therefore that's the way it is. And this is what they believe. The idea of objective reality would mean that you can't have transgendered athletes running in women's competitions, because no matter what stage of a transformation they be in, and I've got nothing against them in terms of the society, but they are born with a male pelvis that gives them certain mechanical advantages that cannot be equalized. If hamster can be spelled one way correctly, then there's no such thing as free college, and there's no such thing as any of this stuff that they believe in. Now, the good news is that reality is going to win this fight, but the bad news is there's going to be an awful lot of damage done, and not to us. It's taken me a long time to get to this point. These millennials didn't ask to be raised this way. This wasn't their goal. It was their parents who allowed this, who every single thing, why should she possibly agree to spell things the way that her boss spells things, Steve? When every single piece of artwork she's ever done is just the greatest thing ever, and it's gone up on bulletin boards and been shared with friends and gotten 250 likes, why should she possibly have to change the way she spells hamster when, in point of fact, just like everybody else in that generation, she's an absolute superstar and had never been held accountable to any kind of reality or any kind of disappointment or discipline or forget those words. They have never encountered an obstacle that whining did not make go away. And when you train people that way, that's the kind of people you're going to get.
You know, Bill, I'm glad you brought up the parenting, because this gets to the second half of the story that Carol Blymeyer put up on Twitter. So at the end of the argument, the boss goes back to her office. The young lady, starts texting, and the phone rings a minute later, and the young woman puts her mom on the speakerphone in the office where people can overhear what's going on. The young lady bursts into tears and wants her mom to call her boss and tell her not to be mean, the boss who remained calm and professional, not to be mean about telling her how to spell words like hamster. And get this, the mother tells her that her boss is an idiot and she doesn't have to listen to her, and she should go to the boss's boss. This is advice from a mother. She should go to her boss's boss to file a complaint about not allowing creativity in her writing. So,
and you know what the worst of this is that's probably going to work.
It just might. Scott, you've raised 4 kids who have turned into what seem to be very well-functioning adults. If you were to get this phone call, extremely unlikely, from one of your kids, what do you tell them?
Well, first of all, I disagree with Bill. The worst part of this is actually the fact that I now have to throw away that spec script for a sitcom that I wrote because this was exactly the story. And I just thought, what's the most absurd situation I could imagine?
Beverly Hills Hamster will be made someday, so help me God.
That's right. Hamster.
As I was having lunch, I was enjoying a ham sandwich and thinking about this very issue. In defense of this young woman, who, when you say young woman, I'm assuming she's about 7 years old?
Believe it or not, Ms. Blymeyer estimated her age in the late 20s.
She was born in the late 20s, or she's in.
She is in her late 20s. So you would think fairly aware of how the workplace and the world.
See, I'm thinking she may have been born in like the 1520s, because at that time there wasn't kind of a standardized English language the way we have now. It was really dictionaries are a relatively recent innovation in the history of humanity, and getting everybody on the same page, so to speak, of how things are spelt. SPELT has made a lot of difference in being able to even have the rule of law in any given land. Because if you have agreement on how words are spelt, then you can have agreement on what words mean, and then you can actually have law. You can have courts, you can have decisions, you can have legislation. All of that stuff springs from being able to have the common bond of a language that has some consistent characteristics. It would be as if we went to math class and there were some people who insisted on using Roman numerals and other people who insisted on just using tick marks on a piece of paper, or 1, 2, 3, 4 crossover for the 5, and other people who use the numeral system that we're familiar with. So there wasn't always this innovation, and so you could argue, well, then that this is just something that the dominant white male culture has wanted us to do, is to have dictionaries so that somebody could dominate somebody else. It is the oppressive nature of man to publish dictionaries to keep out alternative spellings, which of course are culturally constructed.
That would have been funny.
What's that?
5 years ago.
Yeah, and now
5 years ago, that would have been funny. Now it's just tragic.
there's so much in this story that literally, as you're going on, I'm going, no, Steve, you're just mistaken. This literally is some kind of a sitcom script, and this is not a real story. This can't be something that really happened at work. I mean, that would just be, I'd sooner scratch my eye with a fork than drag my parents into something as an adult. Right? When I left home, my understanding was at that point that my parents had prepared me to live life, not that they were continually in a maintenance mode for me to help me to sustain myself. And it would have been shameful for me to call home and to say, hey, I'm having a problem with somebody and I want you to adjudicate it, like I was a 6-year-old having a fight with my brother. Let me just say this though. This is not typical of young people today. We hear about it more often, but most of the young people I work with, and I work with a lot of them in the workplace who do the same kind of job that I do, but are, my juniors by 30 years, and they conduct themselves with professionalism. They do good work. They are smart. They are kind. They are gracious. In their after hours, they may be engaged in some kinds of lifestyle choices that I'm not engaged in, but they're able to put that aside when they come to work, and they're able to act in a professional manner. And any one of them that I can think of would be embarrassed to see one of their colleagues doing something like this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, part of this might be regional as well as generational. I suspect there's a lot more common sense going on down deep in the heart of Texas where you are, Scott, than in our coastal blue enclaves like New York, Los Angeles,
this area,
San
Steve, is made up
Portland,
almost, where I live, almost completely of people who've moved from somewhere else in the country. So my theory is it's not necessarily Texas breeding that produces that. It's just that all the decent people move to Texas.
Absolutely. It's probably, wow, stick around in Colorado. A lot of people bug me about this online. Well, how do you know it's true? It's just somebody saying that she overheard this thing. And I'll tell you, it has the ring of truth to it. Years ago, I was reading, I think it was in Slate, back when they still published some stuff that wasn't Trump is bad all the time stuff. And it was a really fascinating piece done by a business consulting firm on how baby boomers, this has got to be probably about 10 years ago, can best deal with the Gen X people that were becoming old enough to assume leadership roles and with the millennials who were then just starting to enter the workforce. And they came up with some rules. The usual disclaimers apply. Not every one of every generation is exactly the same or anything like that, but there are certain broad trends that as an upper level older baby boomer manager you should be aware of. And one of the things they said about Gen Xers was don't try and tell them how to do things. They'll just get mad. But if you just set them a goal and leave them alone, they'll probably get the job done. Just don't expect them to get in with any of the stupid corporate, Gen X, I call it stupid, any of the stupid corporate teamwork exercises or any of that. On the other hand, they said they advise millennials form teams easily. They work together very well. With very little management guidance as how to make the team work. But on an individual basis, they're going to require a lot of hand-holding, and don't be surprised, and I think this is an exact quote from this article, don't be surprised if they cry at the office. It's just the way things are now. And so when I read this piece by Ms. Blymeyer, I just flashed on this thing from 8, 9, 10 years ago, whatever it was. So it does have the ring of truth to it. But let me tell you what the real tragedy is. Assuming this thing is true, there is a young woman somewhere, and even if it's just this one person somewhere, even if it's not hundreds of thousands or an entire generation or any of that, somewhere there is one young woman who nobody loved enough to give her the discipline she needs to function properly out in the real world. And that's just a damn shame. That aside, I'm glad we got some laughs out of this because I needed a few. I'm Steve Gray with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. This has been Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. If you like what you see, please click over. We would love to have you as one of our members. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.